In this video, we're going to learn how we can save our users' data so the next time they visit the page, they can pick up right where they left off. For example, if I were to add a new to-do, something new, and I refresh the page, that to-do completely goes away. It was only stored temporarily while that web page was alive. If we were to close the browser, refresh the page, and come back later, that data is no longer around. So what we need to do is figure out how we're going to be able to save the data and then fetch it later. We're going to be doing that using local storage. So let's go ahead and mess around with this over inside of our notes app.js file. Now, when it comes to working with any data storage mechanism, in this case, local storage, we want to be able to perform those 4 basic operations. Those are the CRUD operations, and that stands for create, read, update, and delete. If we can perform those 4 operations, then we'll actually have a data storage mechanism that's useful. Local storage can perform all of those operations, so we're going to be able to store our data and then get the data back the next time the user visits the site. Let's go ahead and mess around with local storage. All of the methods that we're going to be using live on a local storage global variable. This is provided to us by the browser, much like document is provided to us by the browser. We're not going to be setting it or assigning anything to it. All we're going to be doing is accessing methods that live on this object. We're going to start with the C in CRUD, which is create. To create data with local storage, we use local storage dot and we use the set item method. I'm going to call set item and we're going to pass to it 2 arguments. The first argument is the key. The second argument is the value. Both of these are going to end up being strings. So let's say for this example, we're saving the user's location. So I can set up location. This is going to be the same for all users. It's the value that's going to be a bit different. Now, this might come from an input. We might end up saving our real data. For now, though, just to explore these methods, let's just type in a static string. I'm going to use my location, Philadelphia. So all we need to do to actually save this data is to have this line run. If I save the notes app file, this line is going to run. The browser just refreshed, so there we have it. We now have some data stored in local storage. Let's go ahead and comment out this line and figure out how we can read the data previously saved. So we have C down for CRUD. Now it's R for read. To read data, we use another method on the local storage object. This one is called getItem. The getItem method takes just one argument, the key. So in this case, I could say I'm looking for the location that was stored. The value is what comes back from the getItem method. It's its return value. So what we can do is wrap this inside of parentheses and toss a console.log up front. So this is going to have the effect of reading the data from local storage and dumping it to the console. If I save the notes app file over in the browser, what do we get? We get our string Philadelphia printing. I could completely refresh the page, but the data in local storage is still preserved. That's why we're going to be using local storage to save our application data as well. Now, yes, we can actually access the data in our code using getItem, but if you're ever wondering what data you have in local storage, you can actually use the storage tab of the developer tools. Now, not all browsers have a storage tab. I think Chrome does, and obviously Firefox definitely does. If we go over to that tab, we can access local storage. That's the storage mechanism that we're using. And if I click that one, what do we get right here? We have our data. We have location and we have Philadelphia. So as we're creating our applications and using local storage, it can be useful to debug what exactly is stored right here. You could even change the data. So I could double click Philadelphia and change it to something else like Austin. Once I save the data, I could switch back to the console. I could refresh the page, and this time around, we're seeing Austin printing. So there we have it. We can use setItem for create. We can use getItem for read. Now, CRU, U being the third one, update, that also just uses setItem. So we could just call setItem with a different value. The last thing I want to explore is D. How do we delete data that has been previously saved? This is done via local storage, and we're going to be using the remove item method. Remove item, once again, takes just a single argument, the key for the data you're trying to remove. So right here, I could go ahead and remove location. Let's go ahead and save the code and see what happens. If I refresh things by saving the file, we get over here Austin. So Austin is printing because we first read the data, we then remove the data. So at this point, the data should be removed. If I were to refresh the browser running both of those lines again, I get null, meaning that there is no data for the location. So we were able to successfully delete the location data. And if I also go over to the storage tab, we can see it's been removed from there as well. We now have an empty value showing up. Now we can also delete all of the data stored in local storage. To do that, we use the clear property. So clear is a method that doesn't take any arguments. Let's go ahead and see how it works. Right here, I'm going to comment out these lines, which will all be documented in the PDF guide for this video. And we're going to use localstorage.clear. Clear is going to delete everything, no matter what the key is. So over here, we could go ahead and use the storage tab to change our data. I could set location equal to something like Philly. I could add on a new piece of data, and I could set name equal to Andrew. Now we have all of this data in local storage. But if I go ahead and save the file, causing this line to run, after the browser refreshes, we can see all of that data has been deleted. So these are the ways we can perform those 4 operations, our CRUD operations. We use setItem for creating and updating data. We use getItem for reading our data, and we use removeItem or clear for deleting the application data. Now at this point, we've only stored strings inside of local storage, and that's because local storage actually only supports strings. So how is this going to be useful for us when we're trying to store an array of objects? The short answer is that it's not going to be useful unless we can figure out how to convert our array into a string, and there actually is a very simple way to do that. There are 2 methods in JavaScript. The first takes our array and converts it into a string. The second takes a string and converts it back to the array. So we're going to be able to store our array data, like our array of notes or an object or anything else, in local storage, even though local storage at its core only supports string-based data. So let's play around with this. What I'm going to do is delete all of the lines we have right here. Once again, they are documented in the PDF guide. And let's say we have a little piece of information we're trying to store. Const, I am going to provide const a name, user, and I'll make it an object. And we'll just set up those 2 pieces of information, something generic, name, Andrew, age, 27. And what we're going to do from here is figure out how we can store this object in local storage. To do that, the first thing we have to do is use a method on a global variable called JSON. JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, is going to be a way for us to convert our objects into a string. The string is going to still look pretty similar to what a JavaScript object looks like, but it will indeed be string-based data. So let's go ahead and just use JSON first before integrating it with local storage. JSON dot, there are 2 methods we're going to use, and they're both showing up right here. The first one is parse. Parse is what we're going to explore second. What we want first, though, is stringify. Stringify takes in your object or your array or what else, and it returns a string. So I can pass into JSON.stringify the user object, and what comes back is indeed a string representation of it in JSON. So let's go ahead and get that data back. I'll just call this one user JSON. And then we're going to print it so we can see what the data is using lowercase console.log. Right here, I'm going to print user JSON. We can save the file and see what we get. Over inside of the browser, what do we have? We have a string showing up, and the string looks very similar to an object with a few notable differences. In JSON, the keys are also wrapped in double quotes, and we have to use double quotes throughout. You can't use single quotes in JSON, but that's okay. We're never going to be directly writing JSON, so we can continue to write our objects using single quotes and leaving off the quotes over here. All of that formatting is done for us by the JSON stringify method. Now that we have this string data, we can actually save it inside of local storage. Let's go ahead and do just that. Right here, local storage.set item. I'm going to set an item user, and I am going to get its value from not the user object, but user JSON, which is a string representation of that object. Let's go ahead and save Notes app to make sure that this set item call actually runs. Over here, we can explore the storage tab. We can see the string data is now indeed saved. So let's say it's time to get that data back and actually print the name and the age. How are we going to do that? Well, first up, let's comment out all of these lines. We no longer want to have this data. We want to figure out how to get it out of local storage. And the first thing we have to do is just read that value using getItem. No way around that. So const, I can call this something like user JSON once again equals local storage.getItem. What item are we trying to get? Well, we saved user previously, so I'm going to get user. Now we have user JSON. This is a string, so I can't access user JSON.name or user JSON.age to get those two values, even though that's what I want to do. So what we have to do is convert this JSON back into an actual JavaScript object using the other side of the JSON stringify method. That's the JSON parse method. So down below, const user equals, I'm going to use JSON.parse, passing in my JSON data, which I have stored on the user JSON variable. Now user is going to equal an actual object, and I can dump some data to the screen. I could add a template string. I can start off with the name, user.name, then space is, followed by their age, right here, user.age. Let's go ahead and save the application and see what we get. Over here, we get Andrew is 27, which is fantastic. Using JSON.stringify and JSON.parse, we're going to be able to expand the usefulness of local storage from just storing strings to storing pretty much anything, even though in the end of the day, it is represented as a string. Now, it's important to remember that the JSON itself is really just a string. Let's prove it by commenting out this line right here. I'm then going to try to access user JSON.name and user JSON.age. It is a string. It's not going to have these properties. And over in the browser, what do we get? Undefined is undefined. So as we work with our data, we need to make sure that we're correctly using JSON stringify and JSON parse. We use JSON stringify just before we write our object. We use JSON parse just after we read it. I'm going to use Command Z to undo those changes, bringing us back to the working application where we actually get our data showing up. So this has been a quick introduction to local storage. We learned about local storage's methods, set item, get item, remove item, and clear, and we learned about JSON and its two methods, stringify and parse. At this point, we've explored local storage and JSON, but we haven't integrated it into our applications to actually save meaningful data. That's exactly what we're going to be doing in the next video, so stay tuned, and I'll see you then.